Okay, does everybody see this if I pull up this presentation? Are you seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Sweet. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about the power of questions. Questions are really one of the most important things that we could get a grasp on using as a tool. And I know it sounds like a dust statement, and yet if I were to play a game with you to go back and forth to see who could ask the most amount of questions, we almost always go into response mode because we have a heroic sense of being and we want to be problem solvers. And that's an okay thing, except for when we get into the sales side of things. We're not problem solvers, we're advocates for what's best for them and their family. Now, we can present any and everything as information that for them to be able to consume, but at the end of the day, questions are really going to be the key aspect of, are we tapping into the things that they need and understanding where their values are, understanding what their analysis of needs are. It's all about them. And so if we can really tap into the question side of things, we really are in the winning stage of that. So I will say that if you're on Facebook Live with us, you're not going to necessarily get the presentation because of the back and forth. So if you want to, go ahead and hop into the Google Meet if you want to be able to get part of the presentation. If you just got me on listening to me, that's fine too, and we can jump into this. So, all right, guys, the power of questions. We're going to start still with the thing that I always talk about, which is programming leads to thinking, which leads to feeling, which leads to action, which leads to results that then cycle all the way back around and reinforce, again, our programming. So if we're considering this idea of being a sales professional, we need to start thinking in a much different way so that then we can actually move into the feelings that move into actions. The actions begin to produce the results, and the results are reinforced into the programming, right? It starts with programming in what our filters have already been in our life, and yet if we're going to get into a space that adjusts our thought processes, we just have to start thinking differently. Now, I want to make sure that we bring clarity into this. I'm not asking you to change who you are, but if you want to start seeing results from a standpoint of being in a sales position, it is about reframing your mindset to encompass what it means to be a sales professional, understanding that you are an advocate. See, so many times our programming goes into the space of most people view sales in that vein of like that used car salesman mentality. Well, we've got to be thinking like, I am a salesperson who's an advocate for getting somebody their greatest desires. I'm an influencer towards decisions. And then when I think about that as an advocate, well, that makes me feel much stronger than the thought process of a used car salesman. And then that will then in turn drive me towards some actions that are a little bit bigger than just acting in the business. It's actions towards the feeling, which is an advocate, okay? And then that will then in turn build and breed results that then come back around to reinforce our programming. It's really important that we begin to change the way we think about all of the things that is happening. And especially right now, it's kind of pertinent to be in this culture of change and to be able to understand this concept that we've got to be able to adjust the way we think about things so that then we can start moving into the results that will reprogram our thought processes. And then our new norm is what we move forward with. It's not, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. That ship has sailed. Now it's about creating our new normal that can be really incredibly, capitalistic in what we do, okay? So we're gonna jump into today and we're gonna be talking about questions, okay? I want to be able to use resources that is easily accessible by everybody. So I want to make sure and kind of tap you into this book called Spin. It's a book. You can look it up. It's a spin model of sales, and it's a really interesting book because it takes and creates a structure around the way in which we build our conversations or go after prospecting or just have a system around being a sales professional. So it's a spin model. Okay, so it's a model for us. And so essentially what SPIN stands for is situations, problems, implications, and need payoff. And this is our mode in which we got to frame conversations. So there's a lot of different sales books out there, this is just one of the ones that put this idea into the most succinct position for us to consume. I can tell you right now that this isn't rocket science, nor is it anything new. It is more along the lines of aligning information so that we can consume it the best way in which we can put it into action. And so the SPIN model is really good, and it's based off of the book SPIN. I'd encourage you to get the book if you want to elaborate on the things that we're going to talk about today. So situation questions, problem questions, implication questions, and need payoff questions. Situation questions. This is all about collecting information. And so collecting information is 100% the easiest space to get into when we want to start framing our business into listening to clients, building relationship, is finding out those situation questions. It's collecting information. For a lot of this is going to be pre-qualification. All right, this is the pre-qualification moment. This is us getting the information. And one of the things that you need to be able to do is that you can confirm the research from major elements of the sale. Do your homework. So you're collecting information, but you're also doing your homework. One of the best things that you could do is go into a scenario understanding what the answer is probably going to be, and already understanding the things that you can do to align yourself with our consumer and where they're at. Because if somebody was going to sell their house and I show up, sure, I can ask a lot of great questions. But if I did my homework, when I ask those questions, now I have a temperature gauge for where they truly feel that they are in the process. Because if they answer contrary to what the evidence is, that is a true litmus test for their feelings. So doing your homework and understanding situation questions. Now, this is only essential questions. Buyers quickly become bored or impatient if you ask too many situation questions. See, most of us will only ever default to situation questions, and we don't move down the model. Situations are questions like, well, what are y'all doing for this? Well, how does that look? Well, what is this? How is that? What is this? How is that? What is this? It's collecting information. Now, the challenge is that there's a very evidence-based, it's not an evidence-based balance, but there is certainly a balance. And I think you've just got to clue into your connecting, your rapport in the space of asking these situation questions to realize where you've gone too far and need to start shifting into the next mode, the next conversation, and the next model. So again, situation questions. Be cautious about situations questions that are easily the default when nerves or newness strikes, okay? So nerves or newness. Like if I get into a scenario and I don't know what to say next, I will default to a situation question. And if I'm working to move somebody through a journey, and we'll get to the other questions here in a second, but if I've moved people through the process of this journey, I get stunted, and in fear or anxiety or nervousness, I go back to start asking situation questions again. Essentially what I've done is I've given a clue that I don't know what's happening because I'm probably asking you a question I already know the answer to because we've discussed it already. I think some of you may even be putting those moments into your brain going, yeah, no, I've been there where it's like, well, why did you want to sell? It's like, well, remember, I told you it was X, Y, and Z. Well, again, tell me again why you wanted to move. Is so we get a little bit nervous and we go back to situational questions, and so that can help to that can hurt us in derailing the movement of our conversation, getting a movement, getting a rhythm into our conversations. The second question in that is going to be our problem questions. Problem questions are our opportunity to probe for problems, difficulties, or dissatisfactions. Okay, it's our ability to probe for problems, difficulties, or dissatisfactions. If you uncover problems you can solve, then you're potentially providing a buyer with something useful. This is our moment to create the doubt. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if we don't sell your home, where are you going to go? If we don't sell your home, what are you going to do? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if we're unable to go under contract, what is y'all's next plan? You know, it just gives us a moment to be able to create doubt. What happens if you don't get A, B, and C out of your needs analysis? What is it going to look like if? So it's our ability to probe. And the reason why we want to be able to bring up problem questions is exactly this moment. I had a conversation this week with somebody, and it was about balancing some of the things that they were doing in their business. So they were looking at how to balance some of the things that they were doing. And they kept going back into this one little space. And in that space, it was all about what is happening right now, but we were having a future tense conversation. So they're just trying to figure out like how to adjust their marketing for the future. But everything they were talking about was right now. And so I asked them, I said, what happens if you make a decision right now that only has a short-term effect on a goal that you're looking to have a long-term change? And in that one moment, that question, I know as simple as it sounds, they go, well, I guess we're having this conversation again in 2 weeks. I said, I think you're right. I think we are having this conversation again in 2 weeks. So what can we do right now to look at the future? Because what if we only ever have this conversation every 2 weeks? Do you believe that you will get what your desire is for your marketing dollars? And this person was like, oh my gosh, no, like we're going to go. I was like, okay, so what's holding you back? And that's when we get into the space of being able to find where their fears and all that stuff is. So our problem questions are about just unearthing it. Now, here's the deal though. You want to make sure you're very cautious in this. This is a skill set, okay? We're going to be learning all this stuff in a skill set moment. So you've got to be able to look at these questions and ask them in a very specific way in which you are moving towards a solution. If you're asking a problem question that isn't aligned, you're going to find yourself in an objection or a condition that you don't have control over. And now, if you find yourself in an area where you truly see that there's an issue that's beyond the conversation that you're having, and you're looking at truly being an advocate, like that would be a great space to ask these questions, but it's not a space to move forward. So when we're looking at problem questions, it's got to be problem questions that move us forward. And there is a balance in this as well. You don't want to stack up all problems, and then for them, they're looking at, well, I guess I don't have a solution. When there's too many problems and they can't find a solution, that's a challenge as well. So again, we're going back to the situation questions, moving into the problem questions, kind of taking them through a journey. And these don't necessarily have to be in the same sitting. Like I could ask you pre-qualification, right, those situation questions. And then I can take and move us systematically into another close of, okay, awesome. When I meet with you, I want to discuss A, B, and C. And in the next discussion, maybe that's when we bring in the problem questions as we're getting a little bit more into what their big needs are for their transaction, okay? Hopefully this is making sense to you. If you have questions, guys, go ahead and make sure that you're typing them out in the chat box. And then once we get kind of through this, I'd be happy to answer some of those questions or kind of bring some comment opportunity back into play once we get kind of through some of these slides, okay? Okay, so problem questions. Next thing we need to talk about, implication questions. Implication questions build up the size of the implied needs in any decision, okay? So I have an example from the dialogue in this book. I've actually tossed that into Facebook, and one of my challenges as I was getting things going here, I did not download that, and now that I'm in the Facebook forum going live, it's going to be difficult to go back. And so I'm going to encourage you guys, once you go into the Facebook forum, there is a section that you can go to that says it is all of the files. So if you click on files, you can go through, and there's a couple of documents that I put in there. There is one that says spin selling implications. And so if you open that up, it'll begin to open up, and it looks like this. And so let me see. I actually might be able to get it going. Okay. So implication questions. I'm going to go into this conversation that he was having with a friend of his. So in this book, he's having a conversation about just the value of implication questions when you start really opening up and unearthing the need for change. His buddy wasn't trying to do anything different, but he was just asking him questions that essentially are the implication questions. And it was about buying a car. He had no desire or anything to buy a car. And so it worked on this. A few months ago, I was talking with a friend about cars, and the conversation went like this. Friend, how's your car, Neil? Neil, not too bad. It's getting a bit old, but it still gets me around. Friend, so you're thinking of a new car then? Neil, no, I can live a little longer with the one I've got. Friend, implication question. Okay. But your car must be at least 7 years old. Doesn't this mean that you can't claim any depreciation on it for business use? Neil, I suppose that's true. Friend, implication question. So you're losing a couple of thousand a year in tax write-offs? Neil, I did not work it. I had not worked it out. I don't think that it'd be that much. You could be right. Friend, implication question. And doesn't a 7-year-old car mean that you're getting lousy mileage? Neil, it's true that I've always seemed to be filling up. Yes, it never gave me good mileage, and lately it seems to be getting worse. Friend, implication question. And that's also leading to higher costs for you? Neil, yes, it's expensive to run. Friend, implication question. And doesn't it age also mean much higher oil consumption? You're right. I'm putting a quarter of oil in it every time I fill it up. It's certainly more expensive than to run than I'd like. Friend, implication question. What's the effect of age on your car's reliability? Neil, that is a worry. I've only had a couple of breakdowns, but, well, you know, it's every time I start a journey, I wonder whether or not I'm going to make it out okay. Friend, implication question. And if it does break down, isn't it going to be increasingly hard to find a garage that stocks spare parts for a 7-year-old car? Neil, I've been lucky so far, but that's a good point. Friend, implication question. Wouldn't it be awkward for you if you broke down somewhere and would wait 2 months for spares to be shipped? Neil, yes, that's a worrying thought. You know, I'm beginning to wonder whether or not it's time for me to change. What would you recommend in terms of a new medium-sized car? And so if you look at this conversation, and I feel like we get into these conversations all the time, just kind of in general with our friends. Friends ask us a lot of implication questions, especially those who love us. Truly, just in general, they go in and they say, I need to do this. It's like, well, if you do that, isn't this going to happen? It's like, well, yeah, I didn't think about that. Well, and then when this happens, yeah, I didn't think about that. Well, what about this? Yeah, I didn't think about that. So implication questions are really driving us to get into a space of, yeah, I didn't think about that. And I know that's a little quick, kind of kitschy version of implication questions through his example, and yet it's something that I think we can all attach to when we get into the space of knowing, there are lots of moments when we use implication questions and just curiosity. If we were able to align implication questions and moving in the direction for what we want to have as an outcome, and especially, again, if we're using this to be an advocate, we're not manipulating people, we're using it to be an advocate. It's our ability to unearth when somebody may not have thought of something. I was actually having this conversation this morning with one of the gals in our office, and she was telling me of a situation for a buyer. And I said, well, one of the things that I would ask is that if anything happens and this house is lost, do you understand that if we wait longer and interest rates rise, that you could potentially be spending way more money per month that could add up to be much more than the $5,000 you want off the cost of this home? And so, again, I gave her kind of more of a conversation to have, but the way that we would have worded that in a question is okay, so if we lose this home, what would you do if the interest rates rise and now our $400,000 loan has an interest rate of 3 or 4%, and you're spending more money per month than you are ready to spend than right now? It's like, well, I hadn't thought about that. It's like, I know, and I'm just saying that if that's a possibility, then we can play cat and mouse in this. But if it's not a possibility, we really need to consider what would it look like if we met them where they're at versus playing a cat and mouse game that could end up getting us to lose in the end. So obviously you'd want to make sure that you have some sense of what the outcome should be to be able to have the best implication questions. And they're just unearthing. So the way that I look at it when I'm talking to an agent, especially a mega agent, somebody who's in the business for a while, I want to make sure and kind of tap into what their goal is. And if I understand what their goal is, I can ask implication questions that get them into the thought process of, well, I didn't think about that, right? And so if I'm talking to somebody and I ask them, it's like, sweet, so if you recognize right now that you need a change in your world, what is that going to cost you if you don't change today? And most of the time they're like, well, I don't understand the question. It's like, well, you had mentioned that you want to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and your broker can't help you get there. How many deals do you think that'll cost you? And it gets them to think, it's like, well, I don't know, maybe none. I was like, on the other end of the spectrum, how many could it cost you? Well, I don't know. And not having that skill set, I guess, I mean, I could probably close 3 or 4 more deals a year. It's like, sweet. So 3 or 4 more deals a year is what it's going to cost you. So is it worth you making a longer decision to figure things out, knowing that you could essentially have $24,000 in your pocket this year for making the right decision right now? It's like, no, I don't, it gets you kind of on your heels a little bit. It just is our moment to get people to think. So it unearths a need to change. Balance is still going to be a key to implication questions. I think with any of the questions, it's going to be key is to be able to understand balance. And then kind of coming into this, too many can shift client too negative too fast. So if I keep asking you questions that make you feel as if I'm pressing and pressing and pressing, I may get defensive. And then too few questions means you have brought too many assumptions in your value proposition, okay? And I put on this cell phone AT&T versus Sprint example. So when I was moving into Texas, I actually sold phones out of Costco for a living. That's just what I did. And so AT&T and Sprint, AT&T released an advertisement saying, if you are on our network, we do free mobile-to-mobile calls and texting. Now, when I was doing this was, gosh, holy cow, 17 years ago? 17 years ago, we were paying per text. We were paying a per text kind of plan. And our call was usually a call log. We had minutes. We were paying for minutes and per text. Well, for AT&T to release that anybody on the AT&T network was free calls and free text, that changed everything, because in that day and age, I mean, there were parents who were getting $1,200 bills for data because their kids were texting all of their buddies back and forth all night long. And so now you've got this moment where everybody's relieved. Oh my gosh, free texting and free call. Well, the reality is the whole time they were doing this text campaign and gaining market share, Sprint had always had that as a piece of being part of their network. That had just been a given, but they had never talked about it. And so they just assumed people knew, and they didn't bring it as a marketing tool. AT&T beat them in that moment because Sprint was assuming too much. When we ask too few implication questions, we're assuming too much about the value that we can bring. We've got to be able to unearth enough about the connectivity that in this moment, I can help you get where you want to go on this journey. So let's talk about how we can do that together, okay? So going back into the review, you got situation questions, you got problem questions, you got implication questions, right? We're moving them through a journey. I know a little bit more of the information. I've identified where our problem is. I can ask you further questions to help you understand the implied needs to move and to make a decision. Like this is our decision moment. Problem is just unearthing a problem. Implication question is about moving towards a decision. And then our last thing in this is the need payoff question. So these are going to be positive solution-centered questions about the value or usefulness of solving a problem. An example of this, is it important to you to solve this problem? Why would you find this solution so helpful, so useful? Is there any other way this could help you? Okay, and those are just examples of some of the questions. You remember, you focus your customer's attention on the solution rather than the problem. So we've gotten them through the journey of understanding all of the bits and pieces, and now we're getting into the moment for a close. And a close is just the need payoff, right? They get the customer the need payoff questions. They get the customer telling you the benefits. Is it important for you to solve this problem? Yeah, no, I mean, it is. Now that you're saying what you're saying, I understand, I get it. Yeah, like, I think we need to figure out what we can do today. Awesome. So we had discussed about A, B, and C. Why would you find that as the most useful solution for you? Well, it helps us to be able to align our company to move forward, and it sounds like it's going to give us more marketing dollars to spend on leads. Okay. Is there any other way that you could see that this would help you other than those two things? Well, I mean, in all honesty, biggest thing that we have is making sure that we can protect our agents for the future, right? So we're just utilizing the information, our value proposition, our ability to get in there and have the conversations properly, and it gets them. So this is now them regurgitating the solution in their words in empathy, right? So now they've come back, to understand exactly what they need. All we did was align thought processes. And here's the most beautiful thing. You're going to get through some of this in some of your conversations, and because you're a great fiduciary, you will stop when you see it necessary to stop, because you're not a dirty car salesman. You're an advocate. And being an advocate, a salesperson advocate, you know when and where and how you should slow down and actually get into the right space for having the right conversations. So this is just a model for us to work off of. This is not your way to manipulate an end that you want. It's our ability to be an advocate for thought processes, and especially for people who are looking to buy and sell large things, like large risk especially. And a home is a very large risk. So we've got to be able to tap into what it is they're doing, how do they want to go, where do they want to go, what do they want to do with it. This is our opportunity to be able to tap into them and walk them through thought processes to be able to get them from a very narrow scope to a broadened scope so that they can make the best decision for them and their family. Our greatest joy is to provide enough information and advocacy for them that they can make the best decision for them and their family. We just want to make sure that as a professional, we're aligning with the fact that if they want to move forward, should they want to move forward, their way to move forward is with me. Okay? You got to be able to make sure these conversations are with me conversation. So that's the basic run through on the spin conversation, the spin look. So here's a quick overview of the spin model, and I'll have Crystal make note of who's in here, and we'll make sure and get you just these quick pieces of these slides. But in spin, sellers initially ask questions to establish background facts, but they don't ask too many questions because situation questions can bore or irritate a buyer. Next, they move quickly into problem questions to explore problems, difficulties, and dissatisfaction. By asking problem questions, they uncover the customer's implied needs, right? So we're getting to those implied needs. And then in smaller sales, it could be appropriate to offer solutions at this point. But in successful larger sales, right? So if somebody's ready to close after you've gone into that space, close them. But sometimes they need us to go a little bit further and start to dig into implications that'll help us unearth more. And then again, obviously we get into the need payoff. The biggest thing is if you look on the right-hand side of it. So the seller uses situation questions to establish a context leading to problem questions so that the buyer reveals implied needs, which are developed by implication questions, which make the buyer feel the problem more clearly, acutely, leading to need payoff questions so that the buyer states explicit needs, allowing the seller to sell the benefits which are strongly related to the sales success. Okay? So this, if you only printed out that right-hand side and just thought about that as your way to walk people through a listing presentation, how might your listing presentation look differently? Or a buyer's representation agreement, how might it look differently if this was the structure for which you walked them through understanding what you're doing? If you're an ISA, what if this was how you rapid fired through your qualifications to get people to get into an appointment, right? So you want to get them through these things in a very quick fashion so that then they are taken care of, okay? Hopefully all this is making sense. I know that I say this is the hour that we go pretty quickly, and we are going pretty quickly. We are going to make sure that we slow down at the end for a few questions, but I want to move into one of the things that I love to talk about all the time, and that is the powerful questions triangle, okay? So when I look at this, you read it from the bottom up. That's one of the biggest things. You read it from the bottom up. You got the bottom is what, how, and then you got where, when, and then you've got why at the top of the triangle. So what, how are a powerful start, where, when are creating movement, and why is the most powerful, and yet it's also the most defensive. Okay? I am making sure, I think I did this correctly. Y'all should be seeing my face, my beautiful face. I want to talk about this a little bit further. Okay, let me move my stool. If I start questions with why, you have to understand that's a very defensive question. Why do you want to do that? It puts me on my heels. My mentality goes, if you say, well, why do you want to do that? It's like, well, because it's going to help me. Like, you can even see the furrow in your brow when you ask those questions. Why is a very defensive question when it's used in the wrong order? I can get to why always, but I have to be able to get to why. I can't just jump into why. I have to be able to get to the why. So here's the way I look at things. This is such a great question to start with. What is a brilliant question to start with if you need to see the triangle again? Okay. What? How is also a very easy question to start with. Instead of why, I need to sell my home. Well, why? I'm going to start going into a little bit of a defensive. Now, you won't feel as defensive, but the truth of the matter is that when we are called to the carpet on why, we start to defend ourselves like, you need to know my stance. I need to sell my house. Awesome. What would it do for you and your family if you're able to sell your house? I still got to this answer. What I really wanted was to find their motivation. What got me there? And it got me there together. These questions, when we start here, it is a together moment. Okay? Why do you want to do that? I don't know, because it's going to be the best thing, blah, 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 blah. What would that do for you when you sell your home? What would it do for you when you purchase your home? Okay? Why is easily our biggest default question? We tend to ask why because we don't know how to ask other questions really well. So we've got to be able to start with that concept of getting rid of your why and getting into the what or how. So when we move into the next sections, right? So the where and the when. These are questions that'll help find movement. So if I'm going to go through this and I'm actually having the conversation with somebody, hey, I really need to sell my house. What would it do for you if you were to sell your house? Well, we would do X, Y, and Z. Awesome. When did you want to get there? Well, we want to buy blah, blah, blah. All right, so where is it that you want to go? I want to go to blah, 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 right? So we're creating the destination, okay? And so then we may even go back down. So this is a bounce. We're going to bounce back and forth between this and this. But eventually, once I get enough about the needs analysis, I can ask a why question because now I'm getting into if I built enough rapport, that why question is going to get me into an accountability with being their helper. So there's been enough back and forth in the trust of what would that do for you? How are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? Where do you want to go? What would that do for you? How are we going to get there? What would that do? Right? So we keep bouncing back and forth and back and forth. And finally I can go, man, you've told me about like where we're going to go and all this stuff. And it sounds like there's something a little bit more deeper about that. So why is it important to you that we have all of these things? Well, because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I can X, Y, and Z. Man, now we just dug into the heart of the matter. If we ask this first, what we're going to get is what we really wanted was the what would that do for you question. But instead, now we started with that, they've gotten defensive, and it's going to be harder for us to be able to build back into a rapport to ask this question for accountability, because now it just sounds like we're repeating ourselves. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Sell, I know at the start of the conversation, I asked you why you wanted to do this, so I want to ask that again. Why do you want to do this? It's like, well, we just did that. But if I start here and I move you in the process, once I get to the why is an accountability moment, and I can keep driving back to the why at a high level. Hey, Jane, when we were talking, I know that one of the things you said was the most important thing for you was to be in a space so that then you could start building wealth for your family. How long is it going to take us to be able to get there if we don't put a contract on this home? It's like, well, Randy, I don't know, but is this the right home? I'd love to explore that to you. But I want to make sure I'm always connecting back to the reason why you want to do this. And it sounds like this home has everything you need. So what's the fear that's driving inside of you right now? Objection, 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 condition, condition, objection, condition. Now I can have a conversation to help everybody move forward. And I can truly dig in. If there is a strong fear or something that is a true condition, I can unearth it if I was able to go through this space because there's enough trust built. So most people want to know, do you care about me? Can you help me? Can I trust you? Powerful questions help us to be able to build into that trust factor. If I walk you through this way and you've never gone into a space where you feel like you have to defend yourself with me, I've created a monumental opportunity for trust. And that's why it's so important for us to be able to dig into the questions. Now, I will say that most of us have to practice questions. I'm going to tell you right now, role play and script practice right now, especially in the midst of all the COVID conversations. And we all have a little bit of extra time been tapped into our world. Some of us don't feel that way, but the truth is you've got a little bit. There is a little bit that's been tapped into there. You should be picking up that extra time and finding a way in which you can role play and have a script partner through this. A great exercise in this is just to ask questions, just to keep asking questions. Get on the phone, say, hey, today we're going to do our question triangle. Don't do anything but ask a question back and forth. It's a little game. You can actually gamify. You can have some fun. So just ask questions back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And when somebody makes a statement, they're lost, laugh about it, start it over. We've got to be able to start practicing questions, because if we really want to understand how to help somebody, we have to get out of assumptions into curiosity. And the way we dig information out is by asking questions that are significant to moving them through the process. If we ask questions just to get an answer that doesn't have a goal of moving them forward, that's a challenge. That's what most of us do. We ask a lot of discovery questions and then assume how we're going to get there. If I ask discovery questions in like the spin model, I know where your path is, where you're understanding your path is aligning, where the best case scenario, the best possible use of your time is going to be. And so if I can ask enough questions, I align with that. And now I'm not a dirty car salesman. I'm a guy who can advocate for you because I've asked you all the questions that help you unearth the fear, the objections, the curiosity, the conditions, so that everything is out on the table. And I can help us come to a conclusion for what's the best decision for you and your family. When you can answer that with just straight poise, you become an advocate that nobody can come in and take the rug out from under you as their real estate agent, okay? Or if you're a salesperson, this applies to all of you. If you're a salesperson in anything, if you can run this model, you're ahead of everybody. It's about structuring these calls, okay? So, powerful questions triangle. This is what I would say is the idea of putting it into play. I wanted to talk to you a couple of things. With a partner, I would say if you're going to create a role play partner, get 3 questions for each spin section. So create a role play partner. Find somebody in this room, find somebody in the forum, find somebody to role play with and do this. Partner with somebody and create 3 questions for each spin section specifically towards what you do for a living. I like, so Gunny, who is one of our agents, he does this or did this when he was in recruiting. He would always have a structure for everything that he said, and how he had conversations with people is what, why. What, why. That's a great little tool to help you get used to starting to do this. Start with the what question. What would that do for you? Okay? What's that going to bring about? Okay? So why is that important for you? So it's like a what, why. So think about that. What, why. And then the other thing is to recreate the following why questions to what or how questions. So why is that important? Why do you need X, Y, Z? Why are you thinking X, Y, and Z? What could you, or sorry, why could you, blah, blah, blah. Why are you doing / attempting to X, Y, and Z? See, I want us to be able to get into the practice of recreating this, and so your brain will start to trigger. My hope is that just sitting here and listening to this class, your brain will start to trigger when you ask a why question. I do this a lot actually now, because I still catch myself easily going into like, man, why do you want to do that? Or why is that important? Or why? And I'll go, why? Actually, a better question would be, what is blah, blah. So I even correct myself in real time so that then my brain can start to trigger to correct myself. So, okay, guys, not rocket science whatsoever, but it's good just to be able to get into a model. The spin model is a little advanced, and I would have you practice that. Go read the book, understand it, structure your conversations. The easiest way to put spin into practice is to take that little path and create your listing or buyer presentation walkthrough in those gaps. You could even do it in your KW app. You could go through in your KW app on command. There's a places that for building out stuff in your websites and all that stuff. There's a space for building out your app. So to build that buyer's guide or that seller's guide in your app, build those things out based off of walking them through that kind of process. Bring those questions in so they can see it, okay? The other thing that I would say is that if you do nothing, get a role play partner. And if you do nothing, just start practicing this. Start converting all of your why questions to what questions. And that will be the things that will help you take this and not just think about it, but actually put it into action for your business and seeing it return seeing it return, not void, on void, I don't know the word. Seeing it return, gain, whatever. Randy's a doofus. All right, I'm going to open up the lines, guys. If y'all want to talk about this, curious questions, comments, all that stuff, you're welcome. Let's do this thing. If you don't, that's okay too. I know there's a lot of information. Peter, I saw you unmute yourself.
No, I'm fine. What?
Why?
What? What's your question? And why are you asking it? Is this going too slow, dude?
Is this going too slow?
No, my internet.
Oh, I don't know. I can hear you. You haven't actually said anything yet, though.
Because I was on mute. My wife and I were joking around with your why questions. We were role playing.
Oh, well then I'm glad you're on mute. No, I'm just kidding. I was like,
We can hear you.
Amy cut it, like muted it, and we were doing the role play.
Nice. Well, good. Well,
you know, it's our. It wasn't on the screen.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. There's a big need to be able to do that. The what, why. And obviously, you want to build that into asking as many what, when, how questions, and then get to the why to be the exclamation point. It needs to be the crescendo question.
Mm-hmm.
What else, guys?
So you're saying to...
No, go ahead.
I was saying, you're saying to go what? What do you do?
There's a spider on the camera. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, itsy bitsy spider, whatever.
Right?
You're okay.
So what you're saying, I'm vaguely familiar with open-ended questions. These open-ended questions: what, where, when, why, how.
Yeah.
You're saying what you're saying is what, and then just go into why or go up the pyramid.
So if you're going to go into this and want to build advance, it's ask as many questions as you can in this, and then reveal this as a way to move things forward. This is truly where you're going to get their most desperate, detailed need in the move. But if I need a practice, though, I'm going to practice what, why, right? So if I need a practice, it's like, awesome, so we're going to be able to get to selling your home. What would that do for you? Blah, 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 blah. It'll give us the opportunity to move closer to the family. Awesome. So who is the family that you're going to be moving closer to? It's going to be mom and dad. Awesome. Well, why is that important to you? Right? So it's the why is that important to you? The why, it's still getting to, it's still kind of that what question. But a lot of us can't trigger. We can't trigger it off. So we need a pattern. And Gunny just said when he would train people, this is how he would train them to get out of the mindset of going why, and get them into the concept of going like ask a what, why question. What, why. So if you get into a pattern of that, you're going to dig in the information that you need. So I would say if you can get into the space of just going what, how, when, where, what, when, you're digging into this back and forth and back and forth. I would stay here as long as you can before you go, awesome. So what I'm hearing you say is that you need to blah, 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 because you need to blah, blah, empathetic. So why is all of this so important to you? This is, so then that's the revelation of like, I never lived in a home ever that my family owned, and this is my chance to leave a legacy. It's like, sweet. That's pretty strong. So now I have a different level of not even just motivation. I have your biggest fear. I have your biggest challenge. I have the greatest piece of the puzzle that you left out if I didn't take you down that journey. Because that's vulnerability. I'm not going to be vulnerable with a stranger. You may learn this eventually, but if we can find a way to dig it out in the beginning, it helps us build progression throughout the process.
Correct.
Sweet. Anybody else want to toss in? I love it seeing our people, Amy, Ashley, Crystal, Kenny, Lyria. Peter, obviously. Realtor Lee's. Anything else from you guys?
Peter.
If not, I'm okay with being like, I'm not going to just like drag things on. I know that we've got a lot and we're consuming a lot. So I don't want to be the guy who's just going to poke at you until somebody answers. I'm okay with like taking the internalization of this, figuring out how we can put it in practice and move on. That's cool. We're okay. I miss your faces, but I want to make sure that you all can take something and practically put it in your business more than anything else. So I've been trying to keep everything a little bit more shortened even than what I've been doing last week. I want to keep it into that 30, 45-minute range so that you guys can have the extra piece to go. We need to be taking some deep breaths, guys. All right. Y'all are awesome. Go be amazing. Don't stop. Don't stop believing. Love every minute of it. All the other cliche phrases, all the conversations and songs. And y'all are pretty fantastic. Anything you need, do not hesitate to reach out and let us know.